Hi, Sean.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Good, good.
Good, good. All right, sorry. Rachel had to get Rachel the cat. Just like, all right. So, where were we? Hello, welcome back to Money Desperados. And boy, do we have a special treat for you today. This will be the first time we've discussed my Warhammer hobby in depth on the Mundane channel. And I'm sure it's come up, but this will be the first time we go over it. And why are we going to discuss it? Well, I went to LVO, which is one of the bigger tournaments in the world for Warhammer. I joined over 1,000 hobbyist fans in Las Vegas for 3 days of epic gaming. It was held at the Rio, and the hotel was fine. Just fine. I know I talked to a couple people who go to Vegas a lot, and I told them at the Rio, and they just gave me this look like, oh, the Rio. Okay. And you can see the picture of Rio here in the Las Vegas Open. So let's take a big step back and talk about what Warhammer is. It's basically like a complex board game, and then I have here is the pictures of you have to build the models, then you have to paint them, and then you play on a board with measuring tape and dice, which you also have to paint and build the models for the board. So Warhammer is like a big franchise now. When I started playing as a kid, it was basically just the game. But now there's like hundreds of books that are set in the world of Warhammer. There's like dozens of video games. They have their own streaming service, Warhammer Plus, where they have their own custom shows and animations. And they even have ugly sweaters set in Warhammer, as well as some old themed games like Monopoly. And they also have all of these far collections of these board games set in the world and are kind of like jumping off points to get in the hobby. So let's talk about me going down to LVO. I was really painting up to the wire. I was finishing the last details on my tanks Wednesday, and I airbrushed earlier that evening. And then I packed up everything and got up around 5:30 a.m. to get to my 8 a.m. flight and arrived in Vegas around 10 a.m. Got a lift to my hotel. The event moved from Bally's to Rio. And as I was looking on the map for the Rio, I knew it was like across the highway from the strip. So it was going to be harder to go places afterwards. And I wasn't sure what we could do about food. And this trend really did hurt us later. Plus, I lost my phone on the first day. I left it in the lift. And that was quite the ordeal. But we're just going to skip over that. I got it back, and that's good because you kind of need it for the game to keep score and then submit your scores at the end. So by the time I got back and had my phone, it was time for registration. So I headed down to the big convention center. There was a huge line, and I saw many of my friends and people I knew walking about down the hall. And then it took about 15 minutes to get my little wristband, and then I was ready to go. They had the big dealer's hall there with all the people selling stuff. And I picked up, as you can see in this picture, this brush cleaner, because it turns out I don't take very good care of my brushes when I'm painting. They were just selling a bunch of stuff, and I just looked around and was waiting for the preview night of Warhammer. You can see some of these are cool props that they had. So preview night, Thursday. We gathered in the main hall. This is where we're going to play the tournament. You can see some of the terrain here. And this is where the company Games Workshop that makes Warhammer like shows us what's coming out in the year, basically. It was fun. There wasn't a lot of stuff they like really announced, and honestly, all that stuff was immediately posted online afterwards. It's not really worth talking about like the previews they gave us. There was this cool Avatar of Cain model, but that was about it. But it was fun to hang out and just be with fans while they were cheering. It felt really interesting. Here, I'll play a video now. Obviously vertical, like a pro. Sign up for the preview.
To paint everything?
That's me. With my mask. Perfect. All right. Any questions so far? Is that all saying pretty standard?
So wait, each one of these people are there preformed armies that you're building into, or do you literally have any choice of
army? So the way it works is everyone agrees on a 2,000 point army, and that's like the standard for competitive play right now. And then each model has a point value, and there's in the books it tells you all these point values, or people use the app to kind of build these lists. And so theoretically every army is balanced, but of course some have better rules than others. It's like this meta of the game. that changes. So everyone kind of brought their own army. And there are good lists and bad lists. And technically speaking, I brought kind of a bad list because the army that I brought, Imperial Guard, which we're going to talk about very soon, is kind of they're running out. They haven't got their new book yet. They haven't got the new rules. Yes. Friday morning. So this is the day when the tournament starts. So I go to bed. I woke up pretty early, headed down to the hall. It was a little bit of a misstep, which I'll play here. It's going to be very loud.
I want your attention, please. The signal you are hearing is part of the Rio Early Alert System. The reason for the signal is now being investigated. We will advise you further as soon as we have more information. We regret any inconvenience you may have been caused.
Yeah. So no one really knows what the alarm was. And
What was that?
I had just woken up. Like it went off like 10 minutes after my alarm went off. And so I was like, well, they said not to worry about it. So I just jumped in the shower and, just had fun and went, got ready and then headed down. So I went down. I was supposed to meet up with some people and I was hoping I could drop off my army and then go check out the best painted stuff. But there was some miscommunication and everyone was kind of like haphazardly heading down. I didn't want to like leave my stuff. I probably could have in hindsight and just gone, but I was like watching someone else's stuff. So I was just kind of stuck there. And so I kind of missed the best painting scores and stuff, but it's fine. Yeah, so then we kind of sat around until they posted the first pairing. So there's an app called Best Coast Pairings. You sign up for it and then a little alert goes out and then it randomly assigns you who you're going to be facing off in the first round. So my first round in a strange turn of events, there was about 14 people who brought Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard, the army I brought, out of the 800 players. And I got matched up with another Guard player in the first round, which is really crazy odds. So let's play these other videos. Let's see what we got. Oh, this is me hanging out in the hall. Just, it was early. There's all the painting in the corner. Yeah, big hall, lots of boards of terrain and everything. And then this is just a thing of my army that I brought. Here, I'll make a full screen. There they are, my painted boys.
It's a lot of tanks.
There's one girl, the assassin.
So you said this was a bad army. What constitutes a bad or a good army? Like,
So
can you take this army and make it better by like adding another tank?
I'm sure there are better lists out there, and I'm already writing a new one because I have a tournament at the end of February. But I think most people would agree that you're not going to win the grand tournament with this army because the rules just aren't there. You have to kind of get updated rules to be better. And the meta is always changing. Like a new Tau book just came out, and the Custodes book came out about a month before this tournament, and they skyrocketed to the top positions. Like if you were playing them 3 months before this tournament, you probably would never think that you would have gotten like high rankings, but now they were. So that's basically how it works. It's not like League of Legends or any other video game. Like when balance patches come out, some things get better and some things get worse. And mine just hasn't had a patch.
To switch your army up if you
it's-
find yourself unfavorable and
Yeah.
then they're like,
I would
here
say-
it is, the new one.
I would say it's a lot harder than like in video games, right? Like you can't just pick a new character and try to practice with it. You have to buy the models, build them, paint them, and then practice with them. So people that have a lot of armies and a lot of models already painted and built can kind of switch on the meta faster than, the average Joe like me, who, I'm mostly just playing to go have fun, right? That's my plan. So first, let's talk about what I was bringing, and let's go over my army, what my strategies were going into the tournament before any of the games. So I'll be honest, I was feeling very nervous. This is probably the least I've played Warhammer in years, and definitely the least amount of games I've played before a big tournament like the Las Vegas Open. I already knew I was bringing a weak army in terms of an old codex and probably not the most efficient list, but I tried to bring some staples of strong units. I have my big tank commanders, which are in the Lehman Russ tanks, which are in the far right corner. They have a ballistic skill of 3, meaning when I roll a normal die with 6 sides, I hit on a 3, 4, 5, or 6, which is great, right? Usually they're a 4 up, so that's like a 33% chance increase of hits. I brought the missile manticores, which you can see with the 4 missiles on them there, with full payload, meaning that instead of rolling for damage, it's just a flat 3 damage for the missiles and 6 damage for the little tiny hunter killer missile, which is good. That just it takes some of the randomness out of the game, and the more randomness you can take out of the game, the better. And those manticores can shoot what they call no LOS, so without line of sight. So they don't have to see the enemy to shoot them. They can kind of hide behind a building, and the missile is smart enough that it goes and hits them, which Guard have a lot of. It's kind of their thing. I mean, other armies do too, but I think they do pretty well in that. I also brought 6 units of 10 guardsmen, which is just the bog standard foot soldiers that are going to die, most likely. Their only job, in my mind, is to run onto the objectives and try and hold it, or run into table quarters to get secondary objectives. And then I brought 4 of my big beefy boys. You can see them with their little sticks and shields, called Bulgarins. They're like I thought of them as like a counter-strike. So if I'm getting assaulted, they can jump out and save some of my guys. They're good in close combat, but they're not like amazing in the grand scheme of things. But they're good at, defense with their giant shields. So I only brought 4 of them, and that's not a lot. But that's all I could afford points-wise. I also brought a tiny platoon commander. He's like a low-level captain. His job is to stick with some of the guardsmen and give them orders, which is a special mechanic of my army specifically. You can tell them to move, which makes them run again in the shooting phase, which is great to get to a position, like an advantageous position. They also have first rank fire, second rank fire, which if you've ever seen the movie Zulu or Napoleonic era, there's like, it makes them shoot twice in the game, which is great. But in the fiction, they're like standing up in a line. Half of them shoot in the very front, then they kneel. The guys behind them shoot. Then the first guys run forward, they kneel, then the back guys stand up and they shoot. So it's like a well-drilled shooting exercise in the game. So they can shoot twice, which is pretty good. But so he's basically just a support character. He has weapons, but if he's fighting, that's something bad has happened. And then the other thing I brought a separate detachment of these guys called Tempestus Scions. These guys are like special forces. I have 2 units of them, a 5-man and a 6-man. I had 10 points left over, so I just bought an extra one for no real reason. And then the Tempester Prime, which is like their commander. And he's the guy with the pimp cane and the nice black leather coat. And his job is to basically jump down with them and let them reroll 1s to hit, which is, pretty useful. And in this detachment, I also have the 3 trucks, which are new for me. They're brand new, painted up just for this list to give them a shot. They have a ton of shots. They have a Gatling cannon on that shoots 20 shots, then a Storm Bolter, and then hotshot volley guns. And so with all of those, this thing's shooting out it's shooting out 30 shots at 24 inches or 32 shots within 12 inches, which is pretty great. And so the main job of these guys is they have these grav shoots. So they kind of like in the fiction are being deployed from high orbit from jets, and they parachute down onto the objective when they have to be at least 9 inches away from opponents and all that stuff. But we'll get into why those are very important here. And the last piece is I brought this assassin lady. She's cool. She's like a special unit that everyone in the Imperium can take, which we're not going to get into right now, but there's like keywords and you build your list off those keywords. But a lot of the humans can use them. I'm not saying she was probably a good pick, but I painted her up and I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring her. She kind of polymorphs her body in the fiction to like look like an enemy. So she's theoretically on the enemy side of the board, trying to rain chaos on their command structure. And what that means in the game is every time they use a strategy in the beginning of the first turn on a 4-up, it costs them 1 extra point. And so when you're building these lists, you start off with 12 of these command points to do basically special moves. And she makes it cost a little bit more, which is nice. But I lost a couple command points because I bought a bunch of stuff in my list, which is pretty normal. People will spend these command points pre-game to get special things for their armies. Like I gave my Scion leader a special warlord trait, and then I spent another CP to make sure both my manticores, or the missile ones in the middle here, so they both had full payload, the special rule. So I didn't have to roll for damage, it just worked out. So I started the game with 8 command points, which is a little low. You gain 1 every turn, but you also can spend a lot. And the number one thing people usually spend it on is you can re-roll 1 die. If you roll a die, you roll like 3 dice, and one of them's bad, you can spend 1 command point to re-roll that dice. And that's great. Like if it's really important to hit, shoot something, or to save someone with an armor save, like that's a big roll, and people use it a lot. But he uses a command point, so I can only do it theoretically 8 times in the game, but there's only 5 turns, so. but I usually use it for other special moves. This is where the game gets really complex. Like, this is kind of a new mechanic within the last, I'm gonna say 5 years, and it added super depth to the game. And you can see here, there's my Pimp Cane guy on the top right, and then the guy next to him is the platoon commander that's going to give out orders. But these are really the staples of my army: the assassin, the manticore, the Leman Russ tank at the bottom right, and then those two characters giving out orders and dropping where I need them to drop.
So for those, can you go through and tell how much each one is out of the 2,000 points?
I gave you a vague idea. So this assassin is 100 points. The Scion, I think, is like 45, and then the Leman Russ tank is around 200. Manticore is like 160, and so I have 2 Manticores, 3 Leman Russes, so that's like 600. It's already like 1,000 points right there. And then each of the guards units like 60 points, and so it adds up, right? And I use an app called Battlescribe to do it, and it kind of does the math for you, so you can kind of hot swap things on. But back in the day, we used to just use like paper and pencil to do it, but it takes a lot longer. And now they're kind of changing point values a lot in these like balance patches, so things are changing pretty quickly. And so like all the points in my codex are wrong now. I have to use the updated books that have the new point systems. So let's talk about the main strategies and how they work in the game. So each round of the tournament is a specific mission. Here we're looking at the first mission for the first game. You can see this is like how you deploy, and you can kind of see that there's these like little skulls. Those are the objectives you want to get onto. And so the primary objective in the game, it varies very little mission to mission, but you can see here's the description here. You don't have to read it, but if you control one objective, you get 5 points. If you control 2 or more objectives, you get 10 points. And if you control more than your opponent, you get 15 points. That's per round, which is pretty great. So that's like where the bulk of your points are in this Grand Tournament book. But they're changing it now. It's changed a little bit, but this is what it was at the tournament. And then you also get to choose, kind of in secret, but you tell your opponent once you've chosen them, 3 secondary objectives. So secondary objectives are things that you think you can score against your opponent. And it's a good way to tailor things against your specific opponent that you think you can get more points for. And the limit for each secondary is 15 points over the whole game. But some offer less. Like one of the ones I choose, Retrieve Octarius Data, or ROD as everyone calls it, the max it gets is 12. So this is my strategy going in. These are the 2 objectives secondary objectives I chose the most and was planning on choosing a lot. Retrieve Octarius Data and engage in all fronts. So Retrieve Octarius Data is you split the board into quadrants. So there's 4 quarters of it. And a unit has to go into that quarter, use an action, which basically means they can't shoot, they can't fight. They're only doing this one action of retrieving this data. And if they do it by the end of your turn, you get points. And so there's a tally. For the first quarter, you don't get anything. If you'll do it on 2 quarters, you get 4 points. If you do it in 3, you get 8 points. If you do it in all 4, you get 12 points. Pretty simple. And it was something I've been thinking about and I strategized towards, and it.
So is that you had to get all 4 in the same turn, or
no?
You could do one,
you can only
and
do
like that one goes dark, that one goes dark.
Yeah,
once
I think you can only perform
it
once per turn. So in the first turn you can only do it in 1 quarter, and then second, third. So theoretically,
if you had people in place and had the action to do it, you couldn't do.
Yeah, only one unit can do it per
takedown.
turn. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm just going to read it here.
And is the unit a specialty unit, or is it any infantry guy?
It has to be infantry, and it can't be a character. So my tanks can't do it, and my characters can't do it.
Like your assassins couldn't do it?
No, my assassin can't do it. She's a character. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, so the other objective I took a lot was engage in all fronts. So this is, you score 2 points at the end of your turn if you have 1 or more units from your army wholly within 3 different quarters. Again, splitting the board into quarters. So I had 2 secondaries that I was choosing a lot that had to do with quarters, so it was easy to remember. And you can't be within 6 inches of the center. And then if you're in all 4, you get 3 points. And that maxes out at 15, I'm pretty sure, which I don't think I ever scored. Spoilers. And then the last one I kind of kept open to kind of choose something that would be good against my specific opponent, or each mission also has a special secondary you can choose. So for this one mission, you can choose this one secondary. Now, I went through the book before I was on the plane and just wrote like no, maybe, yes for all the mission objectives, and most of them are no. Like I just, my army couldn't do it. So yeah, so this is where, again, it's pretty complex. If I was teaching you guys a Warhammer game, we would probably just worry about the primary objectives first, because you have to learn so much other stuff about units and what you're rolling, how to damage things. So secondaries are something they added, again, fairly recently, probably in the last 10 years, and it added very deep complexity about how to score and how to win games, which is kind of cool. So that's where we stand right now. Before the first round ever starts, this is how I was thinking and how I was going into the win, how I thought I was going to win these games. Yeah.
So you said the rod strategy is 12 points. Is
yes.
that a lot?
Well,
is that good?
It's okay. It'd be better if I chose secondaries that maxed out at 15, but rod, I was like, I can score this. Like, almost doesn't matter what the enemy does. I can score these. And so a guarantee 12 is better than a maybe 15, because that maybe 15 might be a 4 or a 2 or whatever point you get for it. Yeah. So yeah. So it's okay, but a lot of people took it, which you'll find out as we go. So mission 1, retrieval. So we're back to the first round. I just got in, found out I was paired against a guard guy. That's his army on the left here. It's a similar army. He has 1 extra Lehman Russ tank, a lot more troops, and then he also had these 3 walkers, like chicken walker kind of things, and then the 2 manticores that I also had. So I think he was
establish your army. Does it? You may have said this at the beginning, but does it have to equal like a battle ranking? Like, what's to stop him from just taking like 80 tanks?
So it's points. Okay, so points is how you build the list. It's the maximum points, but you also have detachment slots. So like in a normal detachment, you can only have 3 heavy support choices, which are tanks, usually big guns, and then you have to have, if you're doing like a battalion detachment, you have to have, I think it's 4 or 6 troops. Might be 6, might be 3. But yeah, so there's a bunch of different attachments. You can choose these attachments, and they kind of tell you how to fill out the different slots. There's HQ slots, fast attack, troops, elites, and heavy support. And so that also limits you a little bit, as well as the points. Like theoretically, I could only take a certain amount of manticores. If I had only 1 detachment, I can only take 3 max. So yeah, there's multiple ways that balance army lists that way. But he went a little bit different. So I think he had 3 tank commanders and then 1 character tank guy named Pask. So here's the mission. We're deployed long ways. Like we're each on, you can see the red and the green. And you can see how the objectives are. Each of us have an objective in our deployment, and then 2 that are in like no man's land, which is going to be interesting. Generally speaking, I like to be far away because I have a lot more time to shoot at things, but it makes objectives harder. So I took Rod, Retrieve Victorious Data, like we discussed. I took Engage, and then I was really interested in what I should take in the last one. I ended up taking Bring It Down, which is basically gives me points for killing tanks, because he had a lot of tanks and I have a lot of tanks. And I needed to kill his tanks to win the game, basically, because if his tanks lived long, then I died. And he took Rod, Engage, so we did the same on that. He also took Assassinate, which is good, because I have a lot of characters, and he gets points for killing them with Assassinate. So here's a bunch of stuff. You can you see my mouse or no?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, he won first turn. So that means he gets to go first, which I really hated, because that means I get to have to survive a whole turn of his before I can start attacking back. So he runs up his little chicken walkers here. He touches the objectives. So he's taken the 2 in no man's land and the 2 closer to me in no man's land. So right now he has 5 objectives on his turn, which is bad for me. I have to deal with that. So he knew that by moving those chickens. Like, those chickens are not going to live, but I have to deal with them now. He also killed one of my manticores immediately, just by his really good shooting. I think he also killed the tank commander, so I was already down like 2 tanks and 3 points because he got an assassinate. So I have to deal with these walkers, and I have to shoot a bunch of his infantry, which are on objectives. And Yeah. So I think I was too scared to like move up a lot because I wanted to get a lot of shots. So I stuck in the 2 quarters I was in where I deployed, and I did my first rod, which is, building for more points. But I didn't kill a lot. I wiped out the chicken walkers and I wiped out some infantry, but I wasn't putting hurt on his tanks like I should have been because they are the real threat. So on the second turn, he picks up another tank commander, which is another of my main battle tanks. And I think I just had like 1 Manticore left. Like he was really destroying me. And so I've pretty much felt like I was going to lose. It was a whirlwind. Like he was outplaying me on all fronts. He got his second rod and he was in 3 quarters again. So he was engaging where I was not engaging on all fronts. I was engaging on 0 fronts. I tried to fight back, but with my limited resources, all I could really do was move troops on the objectives and try to remove his troops that were threatening me, which I did pretty well. Like I got some primary points in the second and third turns, but he was really starting to push me on the top flank, my left flank, where he took my objective. You can see he's pushing here in these objectives. That's just a closer look to the chicken walkers. And you can see here, I'm just stuck in these 2 quarters, right? Like I'm not moving up. I'm holding these objectives eventually and moving out troops, but I'm not engaging on all fronts. So maybe that was a bad objective to take in this mission. Yeah, so then on my third turn, I had my Scions and my Assassins come down. So I did finally get an engage because I now had them on the other table quarters, but he like immediately wiped them out. And he actually made it pretty hard for me. He zoned me out, as they would say. So I have to drop them away 9 inches away from any of his models. And so if he puts enough models around on the board, like you can kind of see here, like some back here, here, there's nowhere I can place them that is not within 9 inches of his dudes. Luckily, my assassin can kind of just pop up almost anywhere. So she like popped up back here and assaulted some dudes. But what are you going to do? So he continues to push me. He removes pretty much all my tanks at this point, and he's on 2+ objectives. So he's getting all the primary points. He gets all of his rods. I think I can do 2 or 3 of my rods, and I get a small engage near the end. But at this point, it's basically just a mop-up mission. And so let's see. On his 4th turn, he wipes out the assassin that dropped down. He gets all fronts. He finishes his rod, manages to hold onto 1 objective, hiding in the forest. But it's basically over. Oh, I'm holding the 1 objective and hiding in the forest. On turn 5, he maximized on his rod, maximized on assassinate. So he just had to get his 15 points primary, and then just see what I could do. And I just, I think I shot everything at a tank to get a little more of the bring it down points. And so the game ended 95 points for Josh and 50 points for me.
Damn.
Just a little rough. Let's watch some of the videos really quick. Turn 1. Move. Yep. Stuff dead. So Josh was a great player. He knew all the strats to be using, and he even helped me out near the end. He was kind of like coaching me about what to do. And he definitely had more games under his belt with the army than I did, and it showed. He didn't we were using the time clock, and we have 3 hours to complete the game, right? And theoretically every player should have an hour and a half. But you do a lot of like setup in the beginning, you talk about objectives, secondary objectives, so that kind of drops it down to like, I don't know, 115, 1 hour and 15 minutes roughly. And we were right up against the line. So like the clock of everybody was running out and we were like posting our scores. So it was rough. And so round 1 was done. I pretty much expected to lose in round 1, and it's kind of a good idea for me because then I drop to more sensible armies, not the top ones. And Josh kept saying to me like, I'm going to cream next game because I won this game. I'm like, yeah, probably. And I should have checked his record. I think he did lose his next game, but I wonder how he did. I should have probably checked his record. So now it's time for lunch. Day 1, time for lunch. It was 45 minutes. And since our game was like right up against time, getting in the food line late kind of sucked. And the hotel had like these like kind of cafeteria stations that was like super not healthy. And usually what we would do in previous LVOs was go to like Subway, get a nice healthy-ish sandwich and like stash it in your hotel room, run up, eat it, then fill up your water, use the bathroom, kind of relax a little bit, and then come down. But the convention hall was very, very, very far from where my hotel room was. And so I was like, there's no way I'm going to get up there in time and then back. So I just ate the crappy cafeteria food, had some Mountain Dew, went outside so we could eat because some of us in our group were kind of really paranoid about COVID, obviously. And then all of a sudden, like the second pairings were up and we had to rush back inside. Round 2. So this mission is Scorched Earth. This is there's a lot of preamble to this. So leading up to LVO, everyone was talking about this army of Tyranids, which are like these giant. They're like a giant swarm of monster bugs coming to consume the entire galaxy. They strip planets of all organic life, which is great, which they eat and then break down like acid pits. Just a quick overview of them. They recently got a new list in the White Dwarf, which is the magazine owned by Games Workshop, which they sometimes release new rules in. And the list is really cool. So it's basically all the biggest bugs in a list called the Crusher Stampede. And so I'd said on record multiple times that I hoped I went up against one of these at the tournament so I could reenact the dropship battle of Clandathu where all the Stormtroopers died. Because my army guys are basically Starship Troopers. They're tiny. Like this, even in this picture here, this guy's a Space Marine. So he's a lot taller than a normal guy. My guy's probably like down to here. And these giant bugs are going to eat them. And so when I saw the list I paired up against was a Crusher Stampede list, I was like, all right, we're doing it. And I didn't have much hope for winning. But my opponent was a guy named Luke. As I understand it, he's been a Tyranid player for like a long time, and he had a bunch of these models just kind of collecting dust on his shelf. So when he saw that Crusher Stampede came out, he's like, oh, I'm going to bring him. And that was cool. So while I said earlier that about 7 to 14 people brought Guard, 46 players brought Tyranids. Mostly with this list. I don't think there was a lot of that. But yeah. And that's the deployment. See how we got. So here's just those more pictures. So he had these guys here. I think he had 3 Tyrannofexes, these giant guns. He had 3 of these Molochs, which like burst out of the ground and do damage to people and then eat people. They're big creatures. Here's kind of a depiction of guardsmen versus Tyranids that burst out of the ground.
Doesn't seem fair. That picture does not look like it's a fair battle.
It's not. So the objectives are interesting. We both kind of have objectives let's go back, I guess, in our like sort of near our deployment zones, and then there's 2 in the middle. So it's pretty even. And so my secondaries I took were retrieve Vicarious data and engage in all fronts because I didn't know what else to choose. And so then I took Bring It Down, which I get points for killing giant monsters. Seems good here. He has a lot of big monsters, and I should get points for that. The thing I didn't do, and some opponents will kind of like help you out. I made a cheat sheet of all my models and what secondaries are really good against them. So if anyone asked, like, how much points do you give up for Bring It Down? I would say like 13 or whatever. And for Assassinate, I give up 15. And there's something called No Prisoners. If you have a bunch of little guys, every 10 you kill is 1 point. So to max that, I'd have to have 150 points for 150 models, which is crazy. And I don't remember if Luke told me it was a good idea or if I just kind of came up with my own, but that's why I decided to take Bring It Down. He's like, I have a lot of big bugs. You have to shoot them, so probably should take it. He took Engage in All Fronts, Assassinate, which I have marked down as a really good one to take against me because people usually max it. And he also took Grind Them Down because it also works for tanks. Grind Them Down is he kills more units than me in a round. So if he kills 3 and I kill 2, then he gets 3 points. And that's another good choice for him because he has a lot of big units and I have a lot of numerous units. So that it made sense considering like 1 big monster counts for 1 and then my unit of 10 guardsmen counts as 10, right? That's a pretty good is a unit. So we roll off and he gets to go first. So shoot, I really needed that first turn to try to like snipe some of these big bugs. So he bursts out everything onto the field and he's running all over and he gets 3/4 for engage. And I feel threatened as they're coming in fast, these big bugs. He picks up one of my tank commanders, one of the pillars of my damage output. In return, I don't do much. I think I move out on the right flank because he was kind of weak on that one. And so I want to try to get that midfield objective. But I don't think I get it on the first round. I think I get it on the second turn. I shoot a lot, but I don't think I kill anything big. I just injure a lot. So I scored 0 points to his 8 points on round 1, which is not a good start. So round 2, he clears up my guardsman holding the right objective. There's no cover from his shooting because it's just out in the open. I did keep him to 10 points on primary, so he didn't have all the objectives. He just had the 2, which, that's something. He did engage on 3/4 again. So he gets the small engage, and he does kill another tank commander, and maybe I think he's going to move to Manticore at this point, which is bad for me. So things are already looking a little grim. On my turn, I get my first points for rod because I rotted in the 2 quarters I already had. I found data on those 2 quarters, and I managed to get on the right flank for a mini engage because I'm pushing this right flank as much as possible. I mean, kind of see that here. So this is the board. These are those guys up here, these big boys. And I'm pushing this right flank to get on this objective here. These 2 objectives here, and my 2 objectives are here. But I'm playing a little cagey, so that's probably not a great idea. I don't know when this is. Oh, that's probably later. We'll get to that video in a second. Oops. So on turn 30, he kills another tank commander. And he kind of is clearing off my left flank quite a bit. And all I can do in retaliation is kill like 1 big bug. And then he brings these 3 in the corner here up underground, which you can kind of see in this video here. He just starts attacking me and like everywhere.
Get him.
There's one there. So they kind of pop up all over the place and just start annihilating me, which is, bad. But I bring down my guys in all the quarters so I can finally get engaged. Assassinate goes and tries to attack these Hive Guard that have been shooting me all game. Mostly just to like run in and try to, I think she killed 1, but it's enough that they can't shoot next turn, which is great. So although it looks bad, he took my entire left flank and now gets 15 per primary, holding more objectives than me. He finished off my assassin, which was pretty easy. It gives him more points for assassinate. And he's engaging on all fronts because he just popped out of the ground. I get more bring it down as I kill some of the things popping up out of the ground, the Molochs, these big guys in the back. I kill at least one of them this turn, and then I'll kill the another one in turn 5. So by turn 5, I think Luke knew he had me. He keeps most things just holding the objectives. He doesn't like try to shoot me off the board because it's the last turn of the game. And so it's basically just on me to get as many points at the end as I can. I finish off one of these big bugs who had like 1 wound left on it, and it ends 61 points for me and 92 points for Luke. So I scored more this round, but he still won. He still scored a lot more. And I think it's because the last turn he just took it easy on me, so it gave me enough tools to gain some extra points. I don't know. He said he wanted to play so I said I wanted to play Crusher Stampede, right? And I sure did. I think I learned a lot, and I credit my success of getting 61 points because he wasn't a very melee focused Crusher Stampede. He was more of a shooty one, which helped me out. Got 61 points. I did make some tactical errors. I didn't fully do all my rods, and I'm not sure why. But, that happens. You're kind of like stuck in these moments, right, of high pressure, and you just kind of forget to do things.
So how unbalanced were the armies? Do you feel like when something would pop out, you were just like, oh, everything around it is dead? Or did you think that you're like, tactically, if I had done this different, I could have taken it down? Or
yeah, tough call. I think if I would have got the first turn, I'd probably be in a better situation. I don't know if I would have won it, but I would have been in a better situation. Yeah. But do I think it's balanced? No. Like, my army could not compete against Custodians, the Dark Eldar, Drakari. Like, there's some top list that I just wouldn't do anything against. Mm-hmm. But I'm in these lower tables now since I've lost the first game and now lost the second game. And I'm coming against lists my speed now. And so this is just a video of me at extra time after losing. You can kind of see how busy it is. Everyone's like moving their army around. These guys are dressed very interestingly. I'm just dodging people, walking around. At the top, you can see they're streaming the top tables on Twitch. And yeah, it's just a mess.
That's what we watched.
Yeah. This is the only time I'd be this close, probably. So unless they showed it now, I probably wasn't on it.
Hey, man.
So I was filming, and then I immediately got distracted by Bridger, who runs Tabletop Titans. Not runs, he is a producer for them. And so I went to their meet and greet later that night. All right, round 3. So we get like a half an hour break in between. I forget what I did. I think I ran to the dealer's hall and picked up objective markers that I'd forgotten to bring. And we can talk about that later. It was a good experience. So this mission, I'm up against the 1,000 Suns, the cult of duplicity, which is a chaos army, which are like the evil humans. They've turned against the light of the Emperor. I played against Mathis, I think his name was. And I like Thousand Suns. They're like all psychers, and they were like trying to save themselves from being mutated by the chaos gods until they did this ritual that turned all of them to dust, basically, and all their spirits. Now, most of them are animated suits of armor, which is interesting. They have a cool like Egyptian motif we'll see in a second. And the whole reason why I didn't bring psychers is so I could take this. If I came up against an army that had a lot of psychers, I could take this one secondary called Abhor the Witch. So that gives me points for killing psychic units, but you can only take it if you have no psychers in your list. Now, should I have brought a psyker? Maybe. It'll bite me in the ass later? It will. But for this game, it was a great move. So basically having a psyker, you can like stop. Every time they try to do a psychic thing, you can roll against it to deny it. Like your psyker's fighting against them with a mental duel. But I had 0. So anytime someone had a psyker and they didn't have enough for me to take a Pour the Witch, then I would just sit there while they did their psychic phase. So it's, not great. The mission here is Vital Intelligence. It's this kind of weird diagonal kind of thing, right? And there's a lot of middle objectives. It's an interesting one. And kind of harder to set up. You have to like do all these weird measurements, and then it's kind of hard to tell where that line is that you can deploy up to. But, So for my secondaries, I chose Rod, of course, because why not? I did take the mission secondary in this one called Data Intercept. You can kind of read it here. So a unit in your army starts performing this action at the end of your movement phase. And then as long as there's no enemies around it, and they have to do it next to an objective, then when it's completed in my next command phase, so they have survived the turn. They have survived the enemy turn, which is hard. But then once they do, you get as many points as you are controlling objectives. So I was like, okay, if I can just swing out, take those top 2 objectives, hold the middle one, then every time I do data intercept, I'll get 3 points. It's pretty good. And I was like,
does your opponent know what your secondary objectives are?
Yes, you have to tell them after you set up the objectives and choose your board side and set up all the terrain. Then you reveal them to each other. I feel like there used to be secret secondary objectives. I might be thinking of a different game, LVO, but in a competitive setting, you just tell them so they know. It just keeps it more honest, right? Because you're like, oh no, I did choose this one instead. But I guess you're
like Clue, where you take a card and you put it in a sealed envelope.
Yeah,
and you put it off to the side.
Yeah, so that it's interesting. So he, for his secondaries, took a Thousand Suns specific secondary called Mutate Landscape, where he basically has a psyker next to an objective, and he gets points for casting the spell on all the objectives. I think he gets 3 points each. So he has to do it on 5 objectives, which is going to be a tall order to get the 15 points. But this is another example of books that have come out in 9th edition have these special secondaries they can choose from them, whereas my army doesn't. Right, we don't have any special secondaries, and usually they're pretty good. We're going to talk about one later. The Space Marines get that is really good, but this one's okay. I think he's kind of probably expecting to get 9 or 12 or something like that over the course of the game, but he can max out at 15 if he does. What else did he take? He took Engage and To the Last. So To the Last is a new one. You take the 3 most expensive points wise models in your army. And if they're alive at the end, you get 15 points. If one of them dies, you get 10. If 2 of them dies, you get 5. And then if they're like units of guys and they're like half damage, there's some other, technicalities there. But it's a good objective if you think you're going to protect your most expensive units, right? So here's what they look like. This is the Thousand Suns. This is basically what he brought against me. A lot of these guys. You have the middle guy, Araman. He's a character on a flying disc, magic user. These are Terminators. They have a 2-up armor save, and you can see the Egyptian motif they have. And here's just like bog standard Chaos Space Marine, Thousand Suns. These are the guys that are just animated suits of armor. And for once, I won the roll-off to go first. And I think I'm thinking to myself, this is my moment. As long as I do enough damage, I can win this game in this first turn. Not win the first turn, but like get in an advantageous position. The problem is, most of his units are out of sight. So my only damage I'm doing is with my manticores on the first turn because everything's hidden. I'm like, okay. So I move out and take the 2 objectives on the top. So like my left flank, but the top ones, the 2 in no man's land, I hold the one by me, obviously. I run out my guys and I'm like, okay, I figure he's gonna be a slow army. And I was like, okay, I think I got this. And I do some damage. I think I shoot one of his to the last units and kill a lot of them. So I'm guaranteeing now he's probably only gonna get 10 points instead of 15, which is great for first thing to do on first turn. That's great. Yeah, and I think so on his turn, he just kind of meandered around the middle board. I don't think he got in good positions yet. And there's a very special thing that's going to help me in this game where I get bonuses for fighting against Chaos because they destroyed the planet of Cadia, which is my army represents Cadia. So that's kind of interesting for later. Round 2, I get the big 15 points for primary which is huge because I'm holding 3 objectives and which is more than him. I got my first rod points because I'd rodded the 2 quarters I was in, and I got 3 for data intercept, like I said, for holding 3 objectives. Like, it's pretty great. So already I was winning on points, which I don't think I had done in the tournament yet. And I putting a big hurt on his right flank, and one of them was the 2 last unit. I didn't wipe them out yet, but there were like 2-3 guys left. The other weird thing about this mission is the primary is you have to hold 2 for the first 5 points, then 3, then more. So my opponent was not getting primary because he was only holding his back objectives. He wasn't moving fast enough to get on to the new objectives. But what I didn't know is that he could like magically teleport his guys around the board. And so suddenly he had a bunch of guys outside my top flank that I thought was secured, but disaster strikes. He fails 2 big charges of 9 inches, meaning he rolled 2 d6s, which is getting a 9 on 2d6. Like craps is hard. That's pretty rare. And even with a reroll, he just couldn't get there. And if he had, the game probably would have been a lot closer because he would have wiped out my guys on the objectives, denied me my next big 15 points. But he was contesting them. So on my next round 3, I only got 5 points for holding 2 objectives because he took one of them away from me. My scions came down and gave me my 3rd rod, and my assassin came in and finished off the unit that I'd really destroyed on the right flank. She came in and wiped out these guys that were sitting there, which is great because they're till last. Now he can only get 10 points on that. I started really scoring a lot on my Abhor the Witch because every unit I killed gave me some points because they were all psychers. But it was kind of hard to tell. I think it might have been like just waiting till the end to tally those up. I didn't think I was doing it very well turn by turn. So yeah, he starts to struggle to get himself in the right position with these charges. So I kind of like ran away. Even with a reroll, he's having some trouble. And I think by the end of round 4, he basically is like, we should call it. I like surrender. And so he just lets me like do my important rolls to see what positions I get into in the last 2 turns. I max my Abhor the Witch. I get my full rod. He mutates another objective. I mean, this was the last game of 8 or 9 hours, right? And so we're pretty exhausted. And I hadn't played a lot since LVO, so like I was pretty exhausted. And in hindsight, probably should have scored out the next turn. Like I kind of like left points on the board, but I kind of felt bad, like we kind of agreed to talk it out. Although they kind of discourage that these days. Like there's a max you can get if someone surrenders now in the new edition. So, and one of his friends came by who he came to tournament with, and we discussed. He brought a really cool army of these giant corn guys, which I have an army of, and we just kind of Khorne. It's one of the chaos gods. He's like all about blood and skulls and melee focus stuff. He's pretty cool.
Gotcha.
There's also this moment
you said you left points on the board, so it's like if you had played out the rest of it, you would have had things that you would have gotten more points for.
I think so, yeah.
But because he surrendered, you were just like, all right.
Yeah.
I guess. And
so like I had won, we marked it up that I won. I think it was like 73-26. So like,
wow, that's a whooping.
Yeah. But like I don't know. I really have to be in there in the moment because it's getting kind of fuzzy now, even though it's only been like a week of like what actually happened. But looking back, I'm like, oh, because we didn't really score the last turn right. We just kind of like skipped over it and we're like, yeah, we're done. And at the time I was like, yeah, that's fine. But if I was really trying to get as high as possible, I probably should have done it. But again, I wasn't. I didn't really care. I realized this moment that I lost one of the pieces of my model. I had this little gun on one of the tanks that was magnetized. It disappeared. I tried to go back and find it. It was gone. It looks like someone kicked it or something. Like I found a very small piece of it, like it got smashed up. So yeah. So at the end of day one, I was 1-2, which is actually the exact record I had at the last LVO I went to in 2020. So I felt good. I had my win on the last game of the day. Yeah, I was tired, that's for sure. And I went to a meetup for the Tabletop Titans and just talked with them, which is a YouTube group that I watched a lot while painting and working on this army, building up to LVO. And they play kind of semi-competitive, and so it's interesting to see, what armies can do. It's a good learning tool, I think. Yeah, and actually,
so this Egyptian army, is it considered one of the lower tier armies or the undesirables as well?
Yeah, Chaos is in a tough spot too. They're like as a whole faction, and this is a sub faction of that. Yeah, they're in a tough spot. Like, I think with the new mission pack, which just came out for 2022, they might do better because the psychic secondary objectives are easier to do. They're kind of hard in this edition. So yeah, I think they're in a little better spot, but they're still not top tier. Yeah.
And you said that you didn't know that he could teleport his guys around and almost got. Was that just you not playing against that kind of enemy?
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
That was kind of like your short-sightedness. You should have known that.
Yeah, and I think he even might have told me about it too. Like when in the beginning, when you first meet up, you like discuss how you want to play the terrain, because somebody are like, oh, this is a ruins, this is a hill, just you have to agree on everything so it doesn't come up during the game, right? And then you kind of like just kind of run down your army, like what things can do, what the models are, and so he might have told me, and I just forgot. But yeah, it did catch me off guard. But there's, I guess in high competitive play there shouldn't be gotchas, but in everyday Warhammer there's gotchas. Like some games are won and lost by gotchas. Yeah. So yeah, I went to this meetup for these YouTube guys that have a great channel. Like the way they do battle reports is amazing. It's very professional looking. Like if we ever try to do it, we could just pale in comparison to that of when I play games. Yeah, so I cut out of the meet and greet, met up for a dinner. I was pretty beat, grabbed some food, and then I went to my room. But I did go down to the bar later, the hotel bar, because I had a friend who came up from Sacramento who came in that night because their tournament didn't start till Saturday. That's the other thing. There's other games at this tournament, right? This is just the main event, the Warhammer Champs. But there's other games being played. Like they have that Marvel game where the Deadpool one. No, like the ones you still build and paint them. It's called Crisis, Marvel Crisis something, Crisis Protocol. That sounds right. Yeah. So yeah, then I went to bed around midnight, and it was an early morning. I get up early, but not quite as early. I'm a little groggy and tired, but I have like 40 minutes to get to my table, and I was like, no problem. I can get down there in 40 minutes. But the elevators, oh my God, there's like 2 banks of elevators, and there's like just lines of people with their armies lined up, and I'm on floor 8, and every time an elevator comes down, it's full of people from the other floors. And we're just like, people are waiting in line like, oh, what are we going to do? People are contemplating taking the stairs, but one person's like, oh, don't take, some of these stairs end on floor 3, and then you have to get onto that floor and then go to like a different set of stairs that take you out. And I'm like, well, that's terrible. I don't want to climb down 5 flights of stairs to get stuck, and then or maybe go back up. Because someone said that, oh, I got down there and the doors were locked. I couldn't, unless the fire alarm was going off, the doors are locked. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we just kind of like waited it out, and then someone started like pressing the up button too, so we could get it on the upswing. And luckily, someone did. And we all like jumped in, and I was carrying my army like above my head, like a shoulder pressing it above, because like I had this like tray. And it was terrible. So I run down, make it to the convention hall. I'm definitely late, but luckily my opponent has everything set up. I apologize, I explain what happened, and we get ready for the game. End of day one. The Rio has the Chippendales. Did not go to that show. I got a challenge coin. Very cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
What does the challenge coin do?
So if you bring a challenge coin from a previous year to the tournament, you can enter a bunch of raffles and stuff and get discounts at some booths.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so something. Okay, so here we go. Luckily got out of the elevator hell, and now round 4, new day. Am running late. Mission 4 is like surround them. I'm playing a guy named RJ who's playing Tau. Now Tau got a new book this last week, but during LVO they're using their old book, and they're historically in a bad spot, not like my army. It turns out that RJ plays at a store that I've played at before down in Santa Clara. And I was like, man, we must have met at some point. He's like, yeah, maybe. You look vaguely familiar. And I was like, yeah, same.
Greatest of compliments. You look vaguely familiar.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough with the masks too, right? We're all wearing masks. Yeah. So like our faces are half covered. So this deployment is like pretty standard. We each have 2 objectives and there's 2 in the middle. And you have like 10 inches to put things on. So I was like, okay. What am I going to take? Well, I once again took Rod and Engage, because honestly, I didn't know what to take, and I reverted to my old strategy, even though historically it has not been going well. I took Bring It Down because he had a bunch of vehicles too, and I was like, yeah, maybe. Although I knew some of his models are really hard to kill. He took Assassinate, he took Rod, and he took To the Last because he had these big battle suits and a hover tank that he knew were going to be hard to kill. And so, if they didn't kill him, he would get 15 points. So I was like, maybe if I just get first turn, I'll be okay. Because he has a ton of firepower. And I was like, I don't think I have enough to kill all that, but I'd have a better chance if I go first. Nope, I failed it. He got first turn. So here's a bunch of pictures. You can kind of see this is like the board is a good. So this is the left side. You can kind of see there's some repeating, but it's almost a panorama. So we've deployed in these. You can see these like, giant battle suit. He would pop out, shoot, and then pop back behind this vehicle is one of its strategies, and I could not shoot it except with my no line of sight things. He had these little flying plane things that came around and were really annoying. He had these giant battle suits that were just killing everything. It was rough. I immediately felt the hurt. He destroyed like I think 2 tanks a turn, 2 to 3 tanks a turn. He took out my mana cores really fast because I couldn't hide them, and he had a bunch of no line of sight shooting too. He killed a tank commander on the first turn. I was stuck with basically my small trucks and my small dudes. I killed some like little jet bike thing back here, and then one of these flyers to give me some points for my Bring It Down, but it was not great. And I engaged on some fronts, which is the 2 points instead of 3. Which means actually I had the lead on the first turn, but that was very deceptive because he was already destroying me. Turn he gets his Rod, he kills another tank commander, removes my second mana core, so basically all of my strong shooting is out. Then he's using his smart missile systems to just destroy my infantry, just like getting them everything I moved up to get on those middle objectives, he's just wiping off every turn. So we're tying on primaries because he's not moving up either, but I'm not stopping him from getting points either. And my assets are just being dwindled down. It's like a really bad shooting gallery. Turn 3, I get my Rod. I basically get all my tanks killed, and I'm hiding behind a building. I think at this point I don't have a lot left. I'm not positive where the big turn happens. But I bring down my assassin to get full engage. I bring down my scions. I actually bring one down in this corner here just to hold this objective because everything else was dead. As you can see, a very dwindled amount of men there as it is. Then my assassin dies. He maxes out assassinate, and he kills more. And basically it. And I think this is the video of what I have left. I have some dudes here. I have one dude there. And I have a tank here and my one dude there. And the dude over there. Okay. I have like 10 models on the field.
So smart missiles into him, big boy guns to them.
Sounds good. And this is just us playing, kind of. You can kind of get a feel of how the game goes, I guess.
Nice.
He's re-rolling. I'm recording the table.
Reroll hits.
And he's killing a bunch of people.
Three.
5 up. 8 at 5 up. So re-roll.
He dies, just barely.
There you go.
He dies just barely.
Yep.
He just looked.
I must have rolled well, but I didn't record any of that.
Spy missiles into that squad.
And so yeah, so this is how it's going. He's just telling me how much wounds he's getting, and I'm removing models basically. But you know, that's the game. That's what my opponents feel about me too, because I do a lot of shooting, right?
Mm-hmm. How come it seems like they are able to destroy your bigger tanks and all that stuff quicker than you can destroy their stuff?
So I've thought about this a lot in hindsight. I think what I was doing is I was putting a lot of infantry in cover when I should have been putting them out in the open and putting my tanks in cover, like prioritizing them in cover first. The problem is we have to deploy, like you deploy, I deploy, right? So I put a unit down, you put a unit down. I would wait to put my tanks down so I could see what a good side for them for targets was. But that also meant that all the cover was full by the time I was putting them down. So that's definitely not good on my point. So
basically, it
was a strategic mistake.
Yeah, don't let them get hit, and they don't have to be quite as robust.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that if I did this game, I would have won. It was very one-sided near the end there. So basically, on the last turn, I'm just holding my one objective, and RJ's like, "Oh, you should shoot this transport. It gets you points, so bring it down." And I was like, "Listen, even if everything hit, I'm not going to kill that." And he's like, he removes it from the table. He's like, "Wow, you killed it." And I was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this?" And he's like, yeah. If you kill this, you have 69 points. Nice. So he let me get 69 points. I think that I was at 66 then. It gave me 3 for taking the thing. I'm not sure. So it was 97 to 69. A pretty good victory for him. So he then took me to the bar. They have these bars set up in the hall, and he got me a beer. So, you know, it was not at all a loss. It was very nice. What was actually great is that it was a very fun game. And RJ is just a very skilled player. He said he plays like twice a week. Like he plays a lot. And he knew what my army did, and he knew how to win, basically. He's like, yeah, I pretty much knew I was going to win. I'm like, well, that's fair. So because I finished early, I got to go to lunch early. So I got to grab food fast. I scarfed it down, got ready for my next game. I felt more relaxed, you know? So come back from lunch. This is the second to last game, and the mission is battle lines. And I'm like, God damn it. I don't want to, because we are...
God damn it.
One, it's limited objectives. There's only 4 objectives in the entire game, right? I do better when there's like 6 and I can kind of steal some on the edges. And it's also long ways again, which is bad because we're in the middle of the tables. So like if we were on the ends, you could go to the end and like move stuff on the cap end of it. But now I have to go all the way around like 2 other tables, which is terrible. I was up against a Death Watch army, which is a Space Marines army that specializes in killing aliens, Xenos. But I had never fought them. This is the first time I've ever, like I knew they existed and I've read parts of the rules, but I'd never played them. And so poor Zach, my opponent, had to explain everything to me because I didn't know anything about it, and he knew a lot about me. And so I didn't know what secondaries to pick. So I went Rod and Engage because that's my safety. And then I took Bring It Down because he had a bunch of dreadnoughts, these like giant walkers. And I was like, yeah, I should be able to kill them, probably. He took Rod, Engage, and Bring It Down because he wanted to kill my tanks. So we actually took the exact same secondaries. So we'll see how that goes for me. You can see some of his cool walkers here. And then he has these Marines here, these Marines here. I did not take a lot of pictures. Yeah, because at this point, my mind is mush, right? And my phone is dying, and I'm just like not really paying attention. I told myself I was gonna take more pictures. I definitely took more than last year and the year before, but still not enough, I don't think. So unfortunately, he got first turn. I tried to hide as much as I could on my end, but I was having a hard time doing that. And this is where I really started to think like, I should have left my troops out in the open and then hide my tanks. Like that's the key. But I didn't enact on this game. Turn 1, he surprised me with how much those walkers could shoot. Very surprising. He kills 2 of my smaller tanks and then races up also very fast onto these objectives. He had these guys with bikes and jump packs to jump on this objective. These guys were already threatening this objective. So my turn, I like jump up to hold it, to give him, you know, to hold something. Because right now he would have had 3 on his next turn and I would have had 1. So I was like, well, I got to try to take this left flank at least. I I put a lot of hurt onto this Dreadnought. I killed the Dreadnought over here, and I put a lot of hurt on this one. What I didn't know is he has this little Tech Marine here that can heal it every turn. And that turns into one of the greatest mistakes of this game. So I'm holding this 2 objectives in the second round. I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting my rod points. I'm killing these. He moves out these bike squads. I kill them all. And then he has another unit come out and do the same thing next turn. So I try to kill him, and then one lives, and he screws up my entire plans. He comes and like attacks my right flank single-handedly. It's terrible. So then these guys come, murder these guys. So he's holding 3 objectives to my 1. By round 3, he's getting 15 points for primary. I lost both those objectives. I'm having a really hard time getting Rod because he's zoning me out by putting these guys in the back, so I can't deep strike anywhere. I get my assassin back here eventually in turn 3, and that gives me some options. And I think I get a Scion Squad in this corner over here. But I don't think I max out Rod. I just get 3, which, better than nothing, I guess. We can probably play this video now. This is probably more around turn 2. He's measuring these guys to come kill these guys.
Okay. And then when I kill him, pile towards the nearest, get my engage. So I try to come all the way around. So what I'll actually do is I'm not basing, I'll actually pile in to where even if I don't kill him, I've gotten enough around.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? I'll get closer, but I'll wiggle that way.
Sound?
So Zach is a really good opponent. He's actually telling me what he wants to do and then how to do it. And it's making sure I know everything that's going to happen, right? So I don't question it later. He's almost teaching this, like leaving this like a teaching game, which is kind of crazy to do in a tournament. It was great. But he was also just a very much better player than me. I have more on the board than I usually do at this point, but by turn 5, I can see he's gonna win. So at the end, the problem is I try to kill this Dreadnought so much time he keeps healing it up. I should have, done something else, I guess, or just focused everything into it to make sure it died so he couldn't heal it. But Zach was just a really good player. It ended up being 57 to 88, so a little less even than my other loss against Country Stampede. And I didn't know anything about his list, so that definitely hurt. It was definitely a good learning game for me. I made some mistakes, underestimated almost everything in his army, and I'm very tired because it's the second to last game now. All right, last game. It's been so long, so many hours playing.
How many hours have you been playing at this point?
Let's see. So, I'm going to say it's like 10 hours on the first day. I don't know if that's true. We start at 9, finish 8 or 7. So it's like 11. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of gaming. And then you have to factor in the breaks too. So it's a lot. So let's say, probably, I'm going to say 14 hours at least at this point. 7 hours. Okay. Let's say. What was cool with this mission is my opponent George is playing Dark Angels. This is the same army that Andy brought and I practiced against. So I was cool. It's good in 2 ways. I know what his army can do at least, but it's also going to be an uphill battle because I've never won against Andy's list either. So, good and bad points there. I hate the deployment zone on this. It's small and like weirdly, you don't get the edges, and it's also the long ways again. And all the objectives are in the middle. You don't have any in your deployment zone. So it means you have to move out, which is not great for my army. My army likes to sit back and shoot. So it was like it looked like a traffic jam in my deployment zone because there was no room. I could at one point I wasn't making decisions with my. I was just trying to fit everything in the deployment zone, which is bad, and almost nothing was in cover, which is also bad. So guess what objectives I took? I took Rod and Engage because I honestly didn't know what else to take. He only had 1 Psyker in his army, so I couldn't take a Poor. And then George says to me, well, I have a lot of characters, and maybe you should take Assassinate. He's like, they might be hard to kill, but that might be a good option. I was like, yeah, okay, that seems fine. And so this was the last GT that allows Space Marines to do their special secondaries. So as a Space Marine player, he can take Oath of the Moment, which is great. You basically get a bunch of points for doing things you'd already be doing. And then he took Stubborn Defense, which is the Dark Angels secondary. So in the future, you can't take 2 secondaries from your faction specific book, but in this GT you could, and you could since the beginning of 9th edition. So stubborn defense is a good one. He chooses one objective, and as long as he holds that, he gets points later in the turns. And then he took something called Warp Ritual, which I at first was like, oh, that'll be pretty easy. Even though I don't have psychers, I have to kill out one psyker and it'll be easy. But he put a giant wall in the middle that I totally didn't understand until later of why he did it. But hey, I won first turn with our limited data of the games I'm playing. That's good news. So here's my traffic jam. This is actually after I moved out this tank and this tank in my first turn. These guys were here and here. Like I was just this block of crap just stuck here forever. And this is what he did. He deployed behind this giant wall, and then these guys are hiding behind. This is a forest, quote unquote. So if shooting through it, I have a -1 to hit. So round 1, he has these bikers here, which are really good at taking out tanks. So I just wipe them first turn. I shoot everything I can at them, and they're just gone. And I'm like, yes, I feel great about it. The problem is I didn't get any points, but I did a lot of stuff to build to points. Like I got engage. I did a rod, and I'm starting to move things to get into a good engage front. But the problem is he gets Oath of the Moment, which is he didn't fall back. So if he doesn't fall back, which Space Marines are really hard to fall back from, that means like running away from combat, he gets a point. If he has a unit in the middle of the board within 6 inches of the center, he gets 2 points. So he's already at 3 points just for that. And then he got 3 points for this thing called Warp Ritual. So he has to be near an objective, and he casts it, and he has to be in the middle, I think. And since I can't stop it, that's in me like 6 points for him on the first turn. And I'm like, it's gonna be hard to kill a guy behind the wall now, isn't it? And it finally began to click. Turn 2 for me, I get 1 primary, and I move out. I'm still feeling good at this point. I have a lot of my assets alive. He couldn't really touch me very far away. He was just working on building up his points, but he wasn't killing any of my stuff. So I felt really good. I had 2 trucks heading to put some hurt on the stubborn objective in the north. I was moving these guys around the corner here to try to shoot at them. Yeah, I thought I was doing really well here. I get my first rod points. I get small engage. Surely I can start targeting characters soon. I'm killing stuff. His turn. All right, he's an apothecary. Bringing guys back from the dead. So I started shooting at this unit here to wipe them out because there's a character here. But then he just brought them back. And these guys are really hard to kill. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. Then his turn, and he brings all the stuff from reserves that I forgot that he had. See, this giant flyer and more of the hated bikes. Like, oh boy. So yeah, let's take a look at the video. So this is probably turn 2 now. He's moving out, and you can see my guys are all moving on the objectives, and I'm about to push the middle. Then he's holding the middle. There's one dude right here. He's a sergeant of a normal guy. He is a hero right now. He's holding this objective away from these guys because he has objective secured. And he kept saying like, that guy's a hero. He's stopping me get points. I'm like, yeah, he is. He ran up to the wall. Everyone else, his whole unit died. And he just hides against this wall for like another turn. And it's really great. But all these bikes show up. And so I start shooting them. I focus fire on them. I can't hurt anyone here. I'm holding this objective at least. Like things are good, but also bad. He starts racking up the points with Oath and Stubborn that I can't stop, and this Warp Ritual I can't stop. And so I'm like striving for points, and he's just like racking them up with almost no effort.
So he was able to just hunker down.
Yeah. So here's me really focusing on these guys. So turn 4, I'm down to 5 primaries because he can fly over and put someone objective secured here, so it takes away from this guy even though he was there. Or maybe he kills him. He kills him too, but I think that's turn 4. I get my last rod, so I'm sticking to the plan. I got full rod this game because he's moving out and not watching the backfield. You can actually see right here, these are my guys that jump down in the backfield to get rod for me. And then the idea was they push out here and shoot them to kind of, help them out. And then my assassin came in the other quarter, and so I got all of my rods, which is great. The problem is on turn 4, he maxed Warp Ritual, and he's still getting, so he's free to cast other spells now, which is bad. It's a big swing for him. And so the game was very close, but I could see it was starting to go against me. Turn 5, last 5, I hold 2 objectives, which are only 5 points in this game. My tanks move flat out to get a big engage, I maxed out Rod already. The problem was I really need assassinate points, but all of his characters were being protected. And so I did all these crazy maneuvers to try to get these characters. And I think all I needed was to kill like one hero and kill all the troops around them. But I just didn't have enough guns. I failed. It sucked. So that's basically the game. I couldn't stop him from getting any primaries. I stopped him from getting any primary points, but he still got all the stubborns and still got all of the warp rituals and oath of the moment. So the score was 66-69. Nice.
Damn.
It's a very tight game. We had a blast. We were joking around with the hero sergeants and invincible terminators. Overall, it was a fun game. Let's see what we got. So this is me moving out stuff to try to stop him. I mostly wiped out these guys, but not all the way. Couldn't wipe out those guys. Here's me just pushing everything on this objective to stop him from taking it. I mean, that's up to you, man. If you want to try. So he was joking. He's like, "Hey, we could just stop the game here and call it a tie." But I was like, "Well, that's up to you. You're winning right now." He ended up taking the win. So that's it. That's the end of the road. That was LVO. You can see this is the tray I was talking about that I had to bench press in the in the elevator with my army. This is the guy who I bought objectives from, and he said if you post this on social media, I'll give you a discount. And I was like, I don't have a lot of followers, but sure.
Yeah.
So I'm already an influencer.
Nice.
Yeah. So here's my pimp guy and my platoon commander and the objectives I bought. He also gave me these free tokens. I think it's for the Game of Thrones game, which I don't play.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
And then I'm building up towards the Gene Stealer cult. I bought these guys in the secondhand market. They have a bunch of like used models basically you can buy at the tournament. And so I bought them because I need these guys from my next army, the next thing I'm working on. So it's always the next thing. They just got a new book, so they're pretty good. Sorry, what?
Is that the one for the end of February?
No, that is no way. There's a brand new army I've never played before, and these are the only painted models I have for it right now. I'm working on some, but there's no way I'm going to get 2,000 points by the end of February. I'm probably just getting my guard again. Probably swap out some things, like the Bulgrins didn't really do good. Probably take them out. I like the assassin, but again, she didn't do a ton. So I might take her out. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I
do have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you're setting up the scenario, you said that the terrain, how is that getting placed? Is that
so? Yeah, that's very interesting. So in this tournament and a lot of newer tournaments, it's actually player placed. So each side gets roughly the same amount, like these big ruins, these crates, these forests, and then you take turns. Whoever the defender is, you roll off for that, and then they place the terrain first. Then I have to place the terrain, and then the big ones have to be 6 inches apart, and then the smaller ones have to be 4 inches apart from the edge of the table and each other. So it kind of forces you to kind of do these similar layouts, but it is player placed. Like he put that wall there for the warp ritual that really helped him out, and I didn't consider it at first, but then I noticed it eventually because he won with it. I mean, he won for other things too, but it was a very close game. If I had rolled better, he rolled worse. I chose not assassinate, something else that would have probably done better. Yeah. So overall, I went 1-5. Not great, obviously, but that's that was my post I wanted to get. It was 1 win at least, so at least I did that. I didn't lose all my games. Yeah.
So what'll be the next army that you are building up?
So it's called Gene Stealer Cult, which are these guys here. They're kind of really interesting. They infect a human. That human gives birth to an abomination baby. And when they're injected with these, it's almost like xenomorphs, right? But they like shoot something in your blood, into your body, and then you kind of hear the hive mind, and they mind control you with it. And they don't force you, but they encourage you to have babies. And your first babies are like abominations. They have multiple limbs. They look kind of like gene stealers. And then when those abominations have babies, then they come out. They're a little more human. They still have 3 arms, but their faces look a little more human. And when those have babies, then they look almost human. Like they can pass for humans. And so all of this is happening under the watchful eye of the Imperium. So they're building this insurrection force. And then after 4 or 5 generations of birth and monsters, and then they rise up and try to bring down the establishment by killing the humans. And what they're doing is they're preparing the planet to be weak when the Tyranids show up. And so when the Genestealer cults become super, like, taking over, prevalent in the world, they send out this psychic calling to the Tyranids to come and take over the planet.
And how the hell does that manifest itself on a board?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. They kind of like have a lot of weird ambush rules. So when you deploy on the board, you get these like blips that look like the scanners in Aliens. And so you put these blips out, and so your opponent doesn't know which blip is which unit, and you can kind of like swap them out, right? So you have this really big advantage of being able to redeploy everything.
Oh.
And also you have a lot of things like they'll pop up out of the ground. There's a lot of shenanigans with them, which makes the rules really complex for them. So I'm a little worried about playing them. Like, it's gonna take a lot of practice, but it's also seems really fun. Yeah, that's my next army.
Cool.
So any closing statements? I mean, the idea is theoretically one day we can post a video of me teaching the Mundane Desperados how to play Warhammer. But that's going to be a little far off in the future. And if anyone cares,
cool,
I mean, yeah, it'd be cool, right? It'd be cool.
It does seem like it's going to be something that's not a one and done kind of lesson.
No. Yeah. I got one of the starter boxes that has the Genestealer cults in it. And it comes with another army, and they're kind of small in number. And it comes with these like custom scenarios. And so I want to get that all painted up. It's called Shadow Throne. And then that'll be a good like intro box to pit either me or two Mundanes against each other while they learn it. It'd be fun. Yeah. Hopefully.
That would be a lot of fun.
But it all depends on if people like hearing about Warhammer on this channel. But we'll see how it goes. When I stream, I usually am streaming me painting on Twitch. Some video games, but I feel like a lot of it is just turned into like Warhammer painting models and stuff. So this is our first foray into us talking about Mundane Desperados. And we'll see what the future holds. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Chud and Sean, for hanging out and listening to me ramble for too many hours. Hopefully I can cut down some of the mistakes and foibles of me talking over myself, replaying videos.
That was crazy interesting to see how at least the different strategies and armies and stuff.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like when I was a kid playing Warhammer, the objectives were basically kill the enemy. I don't even remember placing objectives down. Like even into the mid 2000s, like a lot of the ways you got points was by killing units. So it was all about how killy your army was. How many guns you brought, how strong they were at killing things, and how resilient your other models were. Like it was all just shooting melee. And then they started adding like objective markers that gave you things. But in 5th edition, I think you only got points for holding objectives at the end of the game. So it was really still about killing things and then making sure your models were in the right area at the end of the game. It was weird. But yeah, this is definitely more strategic these days.
Yeah, this shows like with that one army and the fact that he had basically a mechanical healer.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, sure, keep shooting him. He'll absorb all of it.
Yeah.
He just healed him up, and you kind of blew a couple of turns before you figured it out.
Yeah. And
because you mentioned it earlier that there were like 4 lists that were just, if you had those lists, you were probably gonna win.
Yeah.
But is it pretty balanced in terms of like if you had like a top tier Marines list, could you compete against every other I don't know what they called
that's
them,
an interesting thing. Yeah. Obviously there are armies that are better than others, as we discussed. But if someone had given me like this top tier competitive list, I probably would have maybe won 2 games, right? Because you constantly see these same names in the top 20. Like there are just people who are good at this. They're good at the generalship, the strategy of it. And they play a lot of games. They have a lot of experience. So people like to say that, it's just pay to win. But really, the way you keep seeing these same names and people bringing theoretically underpowered list and then also doing really well. Like that happens every once in a while. I think it is. Obviously, there's some advantages to bringing a good list, but at the end of the day, the general is also a big part of it.
Yeah,
Also,
but if you
the
gave,
luck of
like,
rolling dice is tough.
If you gave the person who won like your army, would
Oh.
they still have done well? Or
I mean, they probably would have done better than me. I could see, but they wouldn't have got where they got. Yeah, like I checked. I think the highest ranked guard player was like 350 out of like 800. Although there was a lot of drops. Like there was a. I don't know how many people like actually played games. I think it was probably more around 700, maybe 600. I think 700. When like 1,000 people signed up for it, right? But COVID and just life, people cancel. I was actually angry. One of the people who was above me in the tournament listings, like the actual like numbered rankings of it, he didn't even play all of his games. He like, because you can drop out of the tournament, right? A lot of the really high end guys, if you lose one game, you're automatically not going to win. Everyone who went into Sunday had won all of their games. So that's something I didn't really talk about. But on Sunday, the top 8 play. And all of those guys won every game Friday, Saturday. So some of these like really competitive guys, if they lose one game, they're like, well, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm out.
Tournament's over. I'm going to go.
Yeah. I'm going to go gamble. I'm in Vegas.
Damn.
Of course, I was just there. There was some discussion between some of the people that I went with. They were like, man, do I really want to play tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, I want to get my 6 games in. I don't care what happens. I lost all 3 games on Saturday, and it was still fun. I had some really fun opponents too. Like there was no one I played that was mean-spirited. Everyone was really fun. Also, everyone was really helpful to me at times. They like would tell me, "Oh, did you do this? Did you forget to move this guy or something?" Like it was a very friendly atmosphere. Granted, we were at the lower tables, so, none of us, we all knew we weren't going to win the tournament.
Yeah.
But it was fun. Yeah, it was definitely fun. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. If anyone's here at the end of this, I know it's going to be a super long video. We'll get back to posting some gameplay. We should have an Apex video coming up if I can ever edit that.